Welcome back to Sleep Storyteller, where every night is a new adventure, and every story is a journey into the unknown. I'm so glad you're here, ready to relax, unwind, and let the gentle sound of rain guide you into a peaceful slumber. As we begin tonight's story, I invite you to close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let the world outside fade away. Remember, this is your space, a place to let go, to dream, and to find the calm you need. If you're ready for tonight's story, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below sharing what helps you relax most at night. Now, let's begin. The Ghost of the Silver Sea, as it was called, stretched out in endless waves of pale blue and silvery mist, the vast expanse of water shimmering beneath the pale light of the moon. It was a place of mystery, a place where the sea whispered stories to those who were willing to listen, stories of the past and the future, of those lost and those waiting to be found. And though the sea was calm now, there was a quiet weight in the air, as if something ancient and forgotten was watching, waiting. Just beneath the surface, a small boat bobbed gently in the water, the soft creak of its wooden hull the only sound breaking the silence. On board, a lone figure sat at the helm, their eyes fixed on the horizon where the sea met the sky in a smooth, seamless curve. The boat was old, weathered by time and the elements, but it had been trusted to carry many before, and it was trusted now to carry this figure into the heart of the Silver Sea. The figure was young, their features soft and indistinct in the dim light of the moon. They had come from a small village on the coast, a place where the sea was both friend and foe, where fishermen and traders made their living on its unpredictable moods. But the figure had never been like the others. There was something restless in them, something that called them beyond the shore, beyond the safety of the village and into the unknown expanse of the Silver Sea. They had heard the stories, of course. Everyone had. The stories of the ghost ship that appeared in the fog, its sails as white as the moon, its crew long since lost to the depths. The stories of the ghostly figures that haunted the shores, their faces hidden beneath the shadow of the waves, waiting for someone to set them free. And there were other stories too, stories of treasure, of lost cities, of things buried beneath the waves, waiting for someone brave enough to seek them out. But there was one story that had always drawn the figure in more than the others. It was a story told only in whispers, a story passed down through the generations, but never spoken aloud in full. It was the story of a ghost. A spirit that roamed the Silver Sea, its form ever changing, its presence always felt, never seen. The ghost was said to be the soul of a sailor who had died long ago, but who could not find peace. The ghost wandered the sea, lost and alone, forever searching for something it could never find. The figure did not know why they were drawn to this story more than the others. Perhaps it was the sense of loneliness, the idea of a soul forever adrift on the water, never finding its way home. Perhaps it was the mystery, the unknown, the allure of the sea itself. But whatever the reason, the figure had set out on this journey, to seek the ghost of the Silver Sea and uncover its secrets. As the boat rocked gently on the water, the figure adjusted the small sail and let the wind guide them further into the heart of the sea. The moonlight cast a soft glow over the water, and the mist rose in tendrils from the surface, swirling around the boat like a shroud. The sea seemed to stretch on forever, the horizon a distant line that beckoned, calling the figure to come closer, to venture deeper into the unknown, the night was quiet, save for the soft lap of the waves against the boat's hull, the distant cry of a seabird, and the steady rhythm of the wind. There was a stillness here, an eerie calm that settled in the bones, as though the sea itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The figure gazed out across the water, their heart beating a little faster, a little louder, as they felt the weight of the silence settle around them, and then, just as they thought they could hear nothing more, a faint sound reached their ears. It was soft at first, barely audible, but it grew steadily louder, a low, mournful melody drifting over the water. The figure's heart skipped a beat. The song was not a song they had ever heard before, and yet it felt familiar, as if it had been with them all their life, lingering just out of reach. The song seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once, the sound of it weaving through the mist, rising and falling with the gentle ebb and flow of the sea. It was haunting, beautiful, and full of sorrow, the kind of song that made the air itself tremble with emotion. The figure's eyes widened, their pulse quickening as the sound grew louder, clearer. It was the song of the ghost, they realized, the spirit that wandered the silver sea. Without thinking, they turned the boat towards the sound, letting the wind guide them deeper into the mist. The sea seemed to open up before them, the water smooth and glass-like, reflecting the pale moonlight and the shifting shadows of the fog. The song grew louder still, until it seemed to fill the entire world, the voice of the ghost calling them forward, drawing them closer. The boat moved through the mist like a shadow itself. The song growing ever more intense, its sorrow and longing wrapping around the figure like a blanket. They felt the pull of it, the lure of the sea, the sense of something ancient and lost beneath the surface. There was a power in the song, a call to something deep within, something forgotten but never fully lost. The figure's hands tightened around the oars, their heart racing as they drew closer to the source of the song. They could not see it yet, but they could feel it, the presence of something just out of sight, something waiting for them in the mist. And then, as the boat glided further into the fog, the figure saw it. In the distance, barely visible through the thick mist. They made out the faint outline of a ship, its sails as white as the moon, its hull barely visible in the darkness of the night. It was the ghost ship, the one they had heard about in the stories, but there was no fear now, no hesitation. There was only the pull of the song, the call of the ghost. The figure knew they had come for this, had come to find the ghost and learn its story. And as they drew closer, they could feel the presence of the spirit, as though it was watching them, waiting for them to cross the final threshold and enter its world. The boat drifted silently toward the ghost ship, the mist thickening around it, until the world seemed to shrink down to nothing but the sound of the mournful song and the steady rhythm of the waves. The boat drifted closer, the ghost ship now becoming clearer as the mist parted like a veil, revealing its silhouette. The figure's breath caught in their throat as they gazed upon the spectral vessel, its white sails billowing gently in the wind, though no wind touched the surface of the water. The ship seemed to float, untethered, as though it were not truly part of this world, but rather a ghost itself, a forgotten fragment of time. The figure's hands tightened on the oars, their pulse quickening as the song grew louder, its sorrowful melody filling the air. It was not just a song anymore, it had become a presence, a whisper in the mind, pulling them closer with every note. The sea around them had changed too. The water was now a dark, nearly black shade, reflecting nothing of the moon or the stars, as if the light itself had been swallowed by the depths. The ghost ship was a thing of beauty, and yet it held an eerie sense of abandonment, as though it had not been sailed in centuries. Its wooden planks were pale, almost glowing in the mist, and its hull was weathered, worn by the ages. The figure could not help but stare at the ship's wheel, which turned slowly, as though someone, or something, was still guiding it. Though no one was visible aboard, they could hear the creak of the wood, the groan of the ship's ropes and rigging, but there was no sound of footsteps, no sign of a living soul. Just the song, winding its way through the air like a memory too painful to forget. As the boat neared the ghost ship, the figure could see movement, faint and indistinct, on the deck. Shadows shifted, as though unseen hands were brushing past the edges of the ship, their forms blurred and insubstantial. It was as if the ship itself were a reflection in a pool of water, and each passing shadow was merely a ripple disturbing its surface. The figure's heart beat louder now, the sound in their ears nearly drowning out the song. They reached out, their fingers grazing the side of the ghost ship, and for a moment, the water around them seemed to freeze, the air thick with an unnatural stillness. It was as if time itself had slowed, waiting for something to happen. Then, without warning, a figure appeared at the edge of the ship's deck. The figure was tall, cloaked in shadow, their features hidden beneath a hood that seemed to dissolve into the mist. They stood motionless for a long moment, their presence both commanding and sorrowful. And yet, it was not the figure that made the figure aboard the boat's heart quicken, but the eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness, two twin orbs of pale light, full of sorrow and longing. The ghost did not speak, but the figure could feel its gaze, piercing through the mist, pulling them closer. The air was thick with an unspoken understanding, a connection that stretched through time, through the veils of the world itself. The figure on the boat could not explain it, but they felt it in their bones, this ancient pull, this beckoning. The boat glided forward, drawn irresistibly toward the ghost ship. The wind, which had been absent moments before, now swept through the sails of the boat, filling them with a gentle breath that pushed them onward. The figure had no choice but to follow, as if they were not truly in control of their actions, as though the sea had claimed them, guided them here to this very moment. The ghost ship loomed closer now, its eerie glow shining brighter in the thick fog. The figure's hand reached instinctively for the rope tied to the side of the ship, their fingers brushing against the cold, smooth surface. The sensation sent a shiver down their spine, but it was not fear they felt. It was curiosity, deep and consuming. They had come here to uncover the truth, to discover the story of the ghost of the Silver Sea, and they knew, in their heart, that they were about to learn something that would change everything. With a single, deliberate motion, the figure stepped onto the side of the ship, their feet meeting the wooden deck with a soft thud. The mist swirled around them, the air thick with the scent of salt water and something else, something old, like forgotten memories. The figure stood still for a moment, allowing their eyes to adjust to the dim light that bathed the deck. And it was then that they saw her. She was standing near the helm of the ship, her back to the figure, gazing out across the silver sea. Her hair was long and silver, flowing down her back like a waterfall of moonlight, and her form was almost ethereal, as if she was not quite solid, but rather a wisp of smoke, a shadow made flesh. The figure could feel the pull of her presence, as if the very air around her hummed with an energy that was both captivating and sorrowful. "Who are you?" the figure asked, their voice barely above a whisper. as though afraid that speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile atmosphere around them. The woman turned slowly, her eyes meeting the figures with an intensity that sent a chill through them. Her gaze was not one of anger or hostility, but of deep sorrow, as though she had been waiting for this moment for an eternity. Her lips parted, but it was not her voice that answered the question. It was the sea itself, its waves crashing gently against the hull, whispering in the wind. "I am the lost," the woman's voice said, though it was as if the words came not from her mouth but from the very depths of the silver sea. "I am the spirit of those who wander, never finding rest. I am the memory of the ship and the sailors who have sailed upon it, lost to time." The figure's heart raced. This was the ghost of the silver sea, the spirit they had come to find. But the question remained, what had happened to her? Why did she remain here? "Bound to this vessel, bound to the sea, I have come to understand your story," the figure said softly, their voice trembling in the weight of the moment. "Please, tell me what happened to you." The woman's eyes dimmed, the sadness in them deepening, but she did not speak. Instead, she turned and gestured toward the open sea, her hands sweeping across the horizon. "The story is not mine alone," she said, her voice echoing like a distant memory. "It belongs to the sea. It belongs to the ship. And it belongs to those who sail it. You must listen, and you must learn." The figure stood there, staring at the vast, endless expanse of the silver sea, knowing that they had come to the edge of something ancient. Something beyond their understanding. The ghost was not just a story. It was part of something far greater, something that had been lost to time, and as the mist closed in around them, the boat's gentle creaking faded into the background, the air growing still, and the song of the ghost once more filled the air, pulling them into the depths of the mystery that awaited. The air was thick with the weight of the ghost's words, and the figure stood there, on the deck of the ship, staring out at the vast, silver expanse of the sea. The woman's gaze, distant and sorrowful, never wavered as she spoke. Her words echoed in the figure's mind, winding through their thoughts like the tendrils of the mist that surrounded them. "The story is not mine alone," she had said. "It belongs to the sea. It belongs to the ship. And it belongs to those who sail it. You must listen, and you must learn." But what was there to learn? What was the secret of the silver sea that the ghost, this spirit of the lost, could reveal? The figure could feel it now, a stirring deep within their chest, a desire to understand, to unravel the threads of this mystery that had drawn them here. As the ghost's eyes remained fixed on the horizon, the figure took a tentative step forward, their footsteps soft on the worn wooden deck of the ship. They moved closer, drawn to the woman who seemed both present and not, as if her very existence was suspended between the worlds of the living and the dead. The fog, swirling like a living thing, seemed to part around them, revealing glimpses of the ship's details that had remained hidden in the mist before. The ship was older than any the figure had ever seen, its timbers warped and aged by the passing centuries. But despite its age, it held a certain elegance, a certain grace that could not be ignored. The sails, white as moonlight, billowed gently in a wind that should not have been there. The ropes creaked, the wooden beams groaned, and yet there was something hauntingly beautiful about the ship, something that whispered of adventures long past and memories forgotten. The figure stopped a few feet away from the ghost, unsure whether to speak or wait for her to continue. The sea stretched out before them, its surface still and unbroken, the mist hanging low over the water like a blanket of secrets. The ship seemed to float in a realm apart from the world, as though it were caught in some liminal space, a place where time had no hold. "I've come to understand your story," the figure said, their voice trembling slightly in the stillness. "Please, tell me what happened to you. Why do you remain here?" The woman turned slowly, her gaze shifting to meet the figure's. For the first time, the figure noticed something in her eyes, something that flickered like a shadow passing over a candle flame. It was fear. Not the fear of death, but the fear of being forgotten. The fear of being lost forever. Her voice was low and soft, like a whisper on the wind. "I was once like you," she said, her words filled with a deep sadness. "I was a sailor, lost at sea, just like many before me. But I did not die the way they did. I did not find peace in the depths. I was cursed, bound to the ship, bound to the silver sea. I cannot leave, not until the curse is broken, not until the ship finds its final resting place." The figure's heart sank as they listened. The ghost's tale was one of tragedy, of a sailor who had been doomed to wander the endless sea, never finding peace. But there was more to the story. The figure could sense it, and they could not stop themselves from asking the question that had been burning in their minds since they first set foot on the boat. What is the curse? How did it come to be? The woman looked at them, her gaze steady now, as though she had been waiting for the question. "It is the curse of the sea itself," she said, her voice growing quieter, more distant. "The ship and I are bound by a pact made long ago by a captain who sought to conquer the silver sea, to claim its treasures. But the sea does not yield to those who seek to control it. It is a force of nature, older than any kingdom or empire. And when the captain broke the sacred laws of the sea, he and his crew were cursed." The woman paused, her gaze falling to the deck, as though the memory of that time was too painful to relive. The ship was caught in a storm. One unlike any the world had ever seen. The waves rose higher than mountains, and the winds howled like the voices of the dead. We tried to sail through it, to survive, but the sea was too powerful. The captain made a desperate choice. He ordered us to sail into the heart of the storm, believing that we could conquer it, that we could control the sea itself. She looked up at the figure, her eyes filled with a deep sadness. "But the sea will never be controlled. The storm consumed the ship, and the crew was lost, swept away into the depths. But the ship was not destroyed. It was cursed to sail the silver sea forever, carrying the souls of those who had dared to challenge its power. And I was left behind, bound to the ship, doomed to sail with it for all eternity." The figure felt a cold shiver run down their spine as they listened to the ghost story. It was a tale of hubris, of greed, of a thirst for power that had led to the downfall of an entire crew. But it was also a story of loss, of a soul trapped in a never-ending cycle of wandering, never finding rest. "Why did you not seek to break the curse?" the figure asked, their voice barely a whisper. The woman's eyes flickered with a hint of something, perhaps hope, perhaps regret. "I tried," she said softly. "But the sea is unforgiving. It will not let us go until the ship has completed its journey. And no one has been able to break the curse. I've watched countless ships pass by, watched countless souls try to find their way across the silver sea, but none of them ever return. The sea claims them all. The figure stood in silence for a moment, the weight of her words pressing down on them. They could feel the sorrow in her voice, the deep longing that had kept her tethered to this ship, to the silver sea. It was as though the ghost had been waiting for someone to understand, someone to help her escape the curse that had bound her for so long. "I will help you," the figure said, their voice steady, filled with determination. "I will find a way to break the curse." The woman's gaze softened, and for the first time, a faint smile touched her lips. "You are brave," she said. "But this is not a journey for the faint of heart. The silver sea is not a place for the living, and breaking the curse is no simple task. But if you are truly willing to try, then perhaps there is a chance." The figure nodded, their heart filled with a new sense of purpose. They had come to find the ghost of the silver sea, but now they understood that their journey had just begun. The sea was full of secrets, full of dangers, and full of lost souls, and it would take all their courage to uncover the truth and free the woman from the curse that bound her to the ship. With a final glance at the ghost, the figure turned and made their way to the helm, their hand resting on the wheel, feeling the weight of the sea beneath them. The ghost ship had begun to move again, gliding silently through the fog, and with it, the figure knew, they would sail toward the heart of the silver sea, toward the secrets that lay hidden beneath its surface. The figure stood at the helm of the ghost ship, their fingers gripping the wheel as though it were the very lifeline that tethered them to reality. The silver sea stretched out before them, a vast and endless expanse of water, its surface smooth like glass, reflecting nothing but the gray fog that hung heavy in the air. The mist was thicker now, swirling around the ship, engulfing everything in its soft, ghostly embrace. It was as though the sea itself was hiding its secrets, keeping them just out of reach. Beside the figure, the woman, still an ethereal presence, a ghost of the lost, stood silently, her eyes fixed on the horizon, her long silver hair trailing in the phantom breeze. Her gaze was distant, lost in the memories of a time long past. She did not speak, but the weight of her sorrow hung in the air like a heavy fog, seeping into the very bones of the ship. "I'll find a way," the figure murmured, their voice barely above a whisper, as though speaking too loudly would shatter the fragile atmosphere. "I promise you, I will break the curse." The woman turned slowly to look at them, her eyes glinting faintly in the pale light. There was a sadness in her expression, but also a flicker of hope, a quiet acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, there was someone who could help her. "I do not know if it is possible," she said softly, her voice like the distant crash of waves against the shore. "The sea has claimed many before you, and none have returned. It is not just the curse that binds us here, it is the nature of the sea itself. The silver sea does not let go of what it has claimed." The figure did not respond immediately. They turned their gaze back to the horizon, their eyes narrowing as they searched for something in the distance. Something that would guide them, something that would offer the key to breaking the curse. The air was thick with uncertainty, and the only sound was the faint creaking of the ship, the soft slap of water against the hull. Suddenly, a shadow moved across the water. At first, the figure thought it was just another trick of the mist, a phantom reflection, but then they saw it again, clearer this time. It was a shape, a dark mass moving swiftly across the surface of the sea. The woman beside them stiffened, her eyes narrowing as she too saw the shadow. "That is no ordinary ship," she said, her voice barely audible above the soft whisper of the wind. "That is the ship of the forgotten. It sails these waters, carrying the souls of those who have been lost to the sea, those who are doomed to wander for eternity." The figure felt a chill run down their spine at the mention of the ship. The ship of the forgotten. It was a legend, a myth whispered among sailors and storytellers, a cursed vessel that drifted through the silver sea, carrying souls who could never find peace. Many believed it was the ship that collected the souls of the lost, gathering them to serve the sea's mysterious will. "Can we reach it?" the figure asked, their voice tight with urgency. They could not ignore the pull they felt toward the shadowy ship, the way it seemed to beckon them, drawing them into the depths of the sea's secrets. The woman hesitated, her gaze fixed on the distant ship. "It is dangerous," she said softly. "Many have tried to board the ship of the forgotten, and none have returned. The sea protects it, just as it protects its own secrets. But perhaps it holds the answers we seek." The figure turned back to the helm, their hands steady on the wheel. The decision had been made. They would follow the shadow, seek out the ship of the forgotten, and discover what it held. If it was indeed the key to breaking the curse, then it was a risk they would have to take. As the ghost ship sailed toward the shadowy vessel, the sea around them seemed to change. The water grew darker, the air heavier, as if the very elements were closing in, compressing the world into a narrow, suffocating space. The distant fog seemed to thicken, turning the world into a blur of gray and black. And still, the shadowy ship sailed ahead, its sails ghostly white against the blackness of the sea. The figure's mind raced as they steered the ship toward the mysterious vessel. What secrets would it reveal? What had happened to those who had sailed on it before? The whispers of the sea seemed to grow louder, filling their ears with soft, indistinct voices, like the murmurs of the lost souls who had been claimed by the silver sea. As they drew closer to the ship of the forgotten, the figure could make out more details. It was larger than their own ship, a towering presence that loomed over them like a dark sentinel. The hull was made of rotting wood, blackened with age, and the sails were torn and tattered, flapping in the non-existent wind like the tattered remnants of a long-forgotten flag. There were no lights aboard the ship, no signs of life. It was a ghost ship, just like the one they were on, but this one was different. This one seemed to pulse with a dark energy, an ominous presence that radiated out into the sea. As the ghost ship pulled alongside the ship of the forgotten, the figure's heart raced. They could feel the weight of the silence, the oppressive stillness that seemed to surround the two vessels. The air was thick with tension, and the only sound was the faint creaking of the ships as they floated side by side. "Do you see?" the woman whispered, her voice barely audible in the stillness. "This is where the lost go. This is where they are taken, never to return." The figure swallowed hard, their gaze fixed on the dark ship. The mystery of the silver sea was unfolding before them, and they could not turn back now. They had come this far, and they would go further still, no matter the cost. The woman's voice broke the silence once more. "If you wish to board, you must be ready. The sea does not give up its secrets easily. The figure nodded, their resolve hardening. They would board the ship of the forgotten. They would face whatever trials lay ahead. And they would uncover the truth, no matter how dark, no matter how dangerous. With a single, deliberate motion, they tied the ghost ship to the ship of the forgotten, securing the ropes with steady hands. The figure's heart pounded in their chest as they turned toward the woman, who was now watching them with a mixture of apprehension and hope. "Are you ready?" the figure asked. She nodded slowly, her silver hair shimmering faintly in the mist. "I have waited for this moment for a long time. If you can find the courage to face the ship of the forgotten, perhaps you will be the one to break the curse." Together, they stepped onto the deck of the dark ship. The wood beneath their feet creaking with age, the mist swirling around them like a veil of memories long buried. The sea was watching. And the answers they sought, answers that could free the woman and reveal the secrets of the Silver Sea, were closer than ever before. The figure's boots struck the weathered wood of the ship of the forgotten with a dull thud. The moment their feet touched the deck, an icy shiver ran down their spine. The air here was different, thicker, colder, and charged with an energy that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end. The sea around them seemed to whisper, the waves lapping gently against the hull as though the ocean itself was holding its breath. Waiting, beside them, the woman, the ghost, remained silent, her translucent form flickering faintly in the mist. She was standing close, her presence a comforting anchor in the midst of the oppressive darkness that clung to the ship. The silence between them stretched, thick and suffocating, and the figure could feel the weight of the ship, the weight of the souls it carried, pressing down upon them. "Are you sure about this?" the woman asked quietly, her voice barely audible above the sound of the wind. "Once you step aboard the ship of the forgotten, you will not be able to turn back. The sea will know of your intentions, and the ship will judge you." The figure did not hesitate. Their hand tightened around the hilt of the sword at their side, the weight of the weapon a small comfort in the face of the unknown. "I've come this far," they said, their voice steady but their heart racing. "I can't stop now. Not when there's a chance to break the curse, to free you." The woman's pale eyes softened, though the sadness in them remained. "Then be ready," she warned, her voice low. "The ship will not be kind. It has its own laws, its own rules, and it answers only to the sea." Together, they moved toward the center of the ship, their footsteps echoing eerily on the deck. The ship creaked as though it were alive, groaning and shifting in the water, its timbers protesting the arrival of new souls. As they passed, the figure could feel the coldness of the wood beneath their hands, the rough, splintered surface a stark contrast to the smooth, warm decks of their own ship. It was a place forgotten by time, a place caught between the world of the living and the dead. The mist was thick here, swirling around them in ghostly patterns, as though the very air was alive with the echoes of the past. And in the distance, hidden in the fog, the figure could see the faint outline of a towering structure rising above the ship, an enormous, looming figure that seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. It was the heart of the ship of the forgotten, the place where the secrets of the sea were kept. And where the souls of the lost were held captive. "That is where you must go," the woman said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "The heart of the ship. It is there that the answers lie. It is there that the curse began." The figure nodded, their eyes narrowing as they took in the sight of the towering structure. The closer they got, the more oppressive the air became, pressing in on them like a living thing. The ship seemed to breathe, its ancient timbers groaning under the weight of its secrets. And as they neared the entrance to the heart of the ship, the figure could feel the presence of something. Something powerful, something ancient, watching them, as they passed through the darkened halls of the ship. The figure could sense the souls of the lost all around them, their presence palpable in the thick, stale air. Whispers followed them, faint voices carried by the wind, calling out from the shadows. The figure's heart quickened as they walked deeper into the ship, the weight of the souls pressing down on them with every step. "Do you hear them?" the woman asked, her voice laced with a strange mixture of sorrow and resignation. "The souls of those who came before you. They have been lost to the sea, forgotten by time. And now they wander, their spirits bound to this ship for eternity." The figure nodded, but their mind was elsewhere. They were focused on the task at hand, the heart of the ship. They could feel the pull of it, an invisible thread guiding them forward, drawing them closer to the answers they sought. The path was narrow, the walls of the ship closing in around them as they moved deeper into the darkness. And as they rounded a corner, they finally saw it, the heart of the ship. The door to the chamber was massive, made of iron and wood, adorned with symbols the figure could not recognize. Strange markings covered the surface, their shapes warped and twisted in ways that defied logic. The air around the door was thick with an otherworldly energy, and the figure could feel the weight of the magic that had been woven into the ship's very core. "You must enter," the woman said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "The curse is bound to the heart of the ship. If you are to break it, you must face what lies within." The figure nodded, taking a deep breath as they approached the door. Their fingers brushed against the cold surface of the iron, and for a moment, they felt the pulse of the ship beneath their fingertips, a slow, rhythmic thrum that resonated deep within their chest. It was as though the ship itself was alive, breathing, waiting. With a heavy push, the door creaked open, revealing the heart of the ship. Inside was a massive chamber, its walls lined with strange, glowing symbols that pulsed with an eerie light. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, upon which lay a crystal, the size of a man's fist, glowing with an inner fire that seemed to dance and flicker like a flame. The figure could feel the heat of the crystal from where they stood, its power radiating out into the room. "This is it," the woman said, her voice soft but tinged with something like fear. "The heart of the ship. The source of the curse. The crystal is bound to the ship, to the souls that sail upon it. And to break the curse, you must destroy it." The figure stepped forward, their hand reaching toward the glowing crystal. As they touched it, a shock of energy surged through their body, filling their veins with fire. The light of the crystal intensified, and the room seemed to spin around them. The voices of the lost souls grew louder, their whispers now deafening, their pleas for release filling the air. "You must do it," the woman said, her voice distant now, as though it were coming from far away. "Destroy the crystal. Free the souls. Free me." The figure took a deep breath, their heart pounding in their chest. They could feel the weight of the task, the enormity of what they had to do. The curse, the ship, the souls, everything had led them here, to this moment. And now, with a single, determined motion, they raised their sword high and brought it down on the crystal. The moment the figure's sword made contact with the crystal, the world seemed to explode in a blinding burst of light. The air around them shimmered, the very fabric of reality warping under the immense power radiating from the crystal. Time seemed to slow, and for a heartbeat, the figure could hear nothing but the pounding of their own heart, the rushing of blood in their ears. Every fiber of their being screamed in agony as they were pulled into the center of a force they could neither understand nor control. But it was not just the crystal that reacted, it was the entire ship. A deafening, guttural roar filled the chamber, shaking the walls, rattling the ship's timbers. The floor beneath them cracked, splintering open like a great beast awakening from a long slumber. Shadows twisted and writhed along the walls, reaching for them, pulling at the very air, as though the ship itself were alive, fighting to keep the curse intact. The whispers of the lost souls grew louder, a cacophony of voices rising to a deafening crescendo. They screamed for mercy, for freedom, but it was too late. The crystal shattered with a sound that could only be described as 1,000 screams torn apart at once. A blinding pulse of energy radiated outward, and the entire ship seemed to shudder under the force. The figures staggered backward, their vision swimming as the power surged through them. The air became thick with an almost tangible darkness, the shadows clinging to everything like a second skin. They could feel the ship's anguish, its rage, as though it were a living entity fighting against its very end, and then, just as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. Silence. The figure fell to their knees, gasping for air, their body trembling from the residual energy coursing through their veins. The chamber was still, the flickering glow of the shattered crystal casting long, jagged shadows across the walls. The ship's groans had ceased, the oppressive weight of its ancient power dissipating like smoke. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, and unsettling. The woman, the ghost, was beside them in an instant. Her face pale and drawn, her expression unreadable as she gazed at the broken remnants of the crystal. "You did it," she whispered, her voice strained. The curse is broken, but her words did little to soothe the figure. They could feel the lingering presence of something dark, something deep within the ship. The ship's groans had ceased, yes, but it had not disappeared. The weight of the souls trapped here, the remnants of the ship's curse, still clung to the air like a lingering fog. The energy from the crystal had fractured, but something in the ship's depths still thrummed, as if a part of the ship itself refused to die. The woman turned her eyes toward the figure, her gaze sharp. "But there is more to this than you understand. Breaking the curse may have freed me, but there are still those who were not meant to be freed, those whose souls are tied to the ship. And now, they will come for you." The figure stood, their legs unsteady beneath them, but determination burning in their chest. "I can handle it. We have to leave this place before more souls are caught in its grip." She nodded, her form flickering slightly in the dim light. "We must. But the ship will not let you go so easily. It does not like to release those it has claimed." The air around them began to grow colder once again, the temperature dropping in the chamber like an invisible weight. A low growl echoed from the depths of the ship, followed by the creak of wood, the sound of someone, moving in the darkness. The figure's eyes snapped to the doorway through which they had entered, and their grip tightened on their sword, preparing for whatever might come. The woman's eyes narrowed. "They're coming." Before the figure could respond, the first of the lost souls emerged from the shadows. A dark, spectral form, its eyes glowing faintly with an unnatural light. It was a figure wrapped in tattered, ethereal rags, its hands reaching out as though to grasp the figure, to pull them into the same fate that had claimed it. The soul let out a mournful wail, its voice a tortured whisper that echoed through the chamber. "Stay close," the woman said, her voice urgent. She moved to stand in front of the figure, her hands raised in a protective gesture, though it was unclear whether it would have any effect on the approaching soul. "You must fight. The souls will not let you go without a price." The figure nodded, their heart pounding in their chest. They had already come too far to turn back. The soul reached out, its ghostly fingers stretching toward them, its otherworldly wail growing louder. Without hesitation, the figure swung their sword at the creature, their blade slicing through the air in a wide arc. The blade met the soul with a violent crack, sending a surge of energy rippling through the chamber. The soul let out a final, high-pitched screech before vanishing into the air, its form disintegrating like mist in the morning sun. But there were more. One by one, the souls began to emerge from the shadows, their wails filling the air. They were not all the same. Some were twisted and contorted, their forms disfigured by the years of torment they had endured, while others appeared almost human, their faces etched with expressions of terror and sorrow. Each one moved toward the figure, reaching out with outstretched hands, desperate for release, for vengeance, or for something else altogether. The figure stood tall, sword raised, ready for whatever came. The woman stood beside them. Her face a mask of concentration, her eyes scanning the room for more threats. The battle had only just begun, but the figure was ready. They had come this far. They would not be stopped now. The figure's sword cleaved through the air once more, striking down another soul, but more took its place. Each time they vanquished one, another rose to take its place, until the chamber seemed filled to the brim with the tortured souls of the lost. It was a never-ending wave of spirits, and the figure could feel the weight of their presence pressing down on them with every passing second. The woman was still by their side, but the figure could see the strain on her face. She, too, was fighting the overwhelming tide of souls. But the exhaustion was beginning to show. They were not going to last much longer. "We need to get out of here," the figure shouted, their voice filled with urgency. "We need to find a way off this ship before it consumes us both." The woman nodded, her silver hair shimmering faintly as she glanced toward the exit. "There is a way. But it will not be easy." The figure felt a surge of hope, and with renewed determination, they made their way toward the door, cutting down souls as they went. Each strike felt heavier, as though the weight of the souls was starting to take its toll. But they pressed on. They had no other choice. As they reached the door, the woman grabbed their arm. Her touch cold but firm. "The ship is not done with you yet," she whispered. "But you must trust me now. I will guide you." Together, they stepped into the dark hallway beyond, leaving the souls and the cursed chamber behind. But the ship's eyes, its heart, were still watching. The air in the hallway was thick with an unnatural stillness, broken only by the soft, distant whispers of the souls still trapped aboard the ship. They were everywhere now, swirling through the corridors like dark clouds, clawing at the walls and ceilings as if trying to find a way out. The figure moved quickly, their every step echoing in the oppressive silence, their heart racing as they followed the woman's lead. She moved ahead, her translucent form flickering with the faintest shimmer of light, but even she seemed unnerved by the growing darkness in the ship. They had barely made it past the cursed chamber when the sounds of something far worse than the whispers reached their ears, a deep, guttural growl that shook the very timbers of the ship. It came from below, from the very depths of the vessel, where the ship's heart had once thrummed with power. The figure's pulse quickened, their sword still gripped tightly in their hand, though the weight of it now felt heavier than ever before. "Stay close," the woman said, her voice low and filled with urgency. "The ship's wrath is not easily quenched. It will fight you every step of the way." The figure nodded, their mind whirling with the knowledge of what they had done. They had broken the curse, the crystal shattered, the ship's heart destroyed, but the ship had not yet given up its hold. The very air around them seemed to hum with tension, as though the ship itself were preparing for one final, desperate struggle to reclaim what had been lost. They turned a corner, heading down a narrow, dimly lit passage. The walls here were covered in strange symbols, ancient runes that seemed to glow faintly in the dark, their meaning lost to time. The figure had seen similar markings before, etched into the surfaces of the ship, but now they took on a darker, more ominous appearance. The deeper they went, the more the walls seemed to close in around them, the shadows growing thicker and more oppressive. "I've seen these before," the woman said, her voice strained. "These runes, they are the ship's defenses. If we're not careful, they'll trigger a curse far older than the one you just broke." The figure's eyes flicked to the walls, taking in the twisted symbols. "How do we avoid them?" "There's no way to avoid them entirely," she replied, her voice heavy with sorrow. "We must pass through them. But if we touch them, if we linger too long, the ship will know we are here. And it will come for us." The figure quickened their pace, their mind racing with the weight of her words. Every instinct told them to hurry, to move faster, but the ship seemed to respond to their urgency, the walls shifting and groaning in ways that defied logic. They had only taken a few more steps when the air around them seemed to darken, the faint light from the ship's corridors flickering out like candles in a storm. It was then they heard it, the sound of something approaching. A low, rumbling growl, distant at first but growing louder, closer with each passing second. The ship was waking up, responding to the disturbance they had caused. The sound reverberated through the walls, through the floor beneath them, shaking the very foundation of the ship. "Move," the woman hissed, her voice urgent. "It's too late to turn back now." The figure did not need to be told twice. They broke into a run, their boots slapping against the cold, slick floor as they raced through the dim corridor. Behind them, the growl grew louder, now joined by the unmistakable sound of something massive, something alive, dragging itself across the ship, its every movement a terrifying promise of what was to come. The figure glanced over their shoulder, but all they could see were the swirling shadows that seemed to grow thicker with each step they took. It was as though the very darkness itself was alive, chasing them, pushing them forward. The woman was still ahead, but even she seemed to be struggling against the force that was closing in on them. "We're almost there," she said, her voice tight with strain. "Just a little further." The figure could see the end of the corridor now, a faint light flickering in the distance. It was a doorway, and beyond it, the open deck of the ship. They pushed themselves harder, the pounding of their heart now in sync with the rhythm of their footsteps, as they sprinted toward the exit, but just as they reached the door, a shadow leaped from the darkness, blocking their path. The figure barely had time to react before a massive, spectral creature lunged at them, its glowing eyes filled with a primal rage. It was a beast of the ship, its form twisting and contorting in ways that defied all logic. Its body was made of shadow and mist, its long, jagged claws slashing through the air with deadly precision. The figure brought their sword up, meeting the creature's claws with a clash of steel. The force of the blow sent shockwaves through the air, and the figure stumbled back, nearly losing their footing. The creature hissed, its mouth opening wide to reveal rows of razor-sharp teeth, its foul breath reeking of decay and death. The figure's pulse quickened, their mind racing as they prepared for the next attack, but the woman was already there, her ethereal form flickering with a pale light as she raised her hand toward the creature. The air around her seemed to shimmer, and the shadows recoiled from her touch. The beast screeched, a high-pitched, bone-chilling sound that filled the air, before it was suddenly thrust backward by an invisible force. "It's weakening," the woman said, her voice strained. "Hurry, use your sword." The figure nodded, their grip tightening around the hilt of their weapon. With one final surge of strength, they charged at the creature, bringing the blade down with a swift, decisive motion. The sword sliced through the beast's shadowy form, cutting through the darkness like a knife through fog. The creature howled in agony as it dissipated into nothingness, its form unraveling like smoke in the wind. The figure took a deep breath, their chest heaving as they watched the last remnants of the creature fade into the shadows. But there was no time to rest. The ship was still alive, still coming for them. With the creature gone, they turned back to the door. The woman was already there, waiting for them, her gaze fixed on the exit ahead. Together, they stepped through the doorway and onto the open deck of the ship. The night air hit them like a wave, cold and biting, but it was a relief to feel the wind against their skin. The ship was vast, stretching out in all directions like a floating fortress of darkness. But ahead, the sea seemed endless, its silver waves stretching toward the horizon. The figure could almost taste the freedom, the promise of escape, but they knew that the ship was not done with them yet. "We're not safe yet," the woman said, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "But we're closer now. We need to find the way off this ship before it pulls us back into its grasp." The figure nodded, their gaze fixed on the horizon. The journey was far from over. But for the first time since they had boarded the cursed ship, they could see a glimmer of hope, and they would fight to hold on to it. The figure stood on the deck, the cold wind biting at their face, their hearts still pounding from the battle. The ship groaned beneath them, its timbers creaking in protest as though it were a living creature, still fighting to keep them trapped in its cursed grip. The moon hung low in the sky, its silver light casting an eerie glow over the vast expanse of the sea, which stretched out endlessly before them. The waves shimmered in the darkness, their silver surface almost mirroring the ghostly glow of the ship itself. The woman, still flickering with faint ethereal light, stood beside them, her gaze fixed on the horizon, her expression unreadable. It was clear that they were not free yet. The ship was not finished with them. "We've come this far," the woman said, her voice heavy with weariness. "But we are far from being safe," the figure nodded, their mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. They had fought the spirits, shattered the cursed crystal, and made their way to the deck. But something about the way the ship moved, how it shifted beneath their feet, told them that it was not done. The air still felt thick, charged with an unnatural energy. The ship was alive in ways they couldn't fully understand, and it would not let them leave so easily. "Where do we go now?" the figure asked, their voice hoarse from the battle. "How do we escape this place?" The woman turned to them, her eyes full of a strange, unspoken sadness. "The ship has a heart, a cord that binds it to the sea," she said, her voice quiet, almost reverent. "If you want to escape, you must reach it. But it's not just any heart, it's a dark, twisted thing, bound to the souls of all who have sailed this cursed ship. It controls everything. The shadows, the storms, the very sea itself." The figure frowned, trying to absorb her words. "So, we need to destroy it?" The woman hesitated, her gaze flickering toward the horizon. "Destroying it is not so simple," she said, her voice laden with regret. "To destroy it would be to sever the ship from the sea. But the ship has been a part of this ocean for centuries. If you destroy it, the sea itself will collapse, taking everything with it. The souls, the ship, and even the world as you know it." The figure felt a chill run down their spine. They had not expected such a consequence. The weight of their choice was becoming clearer with every passing moment. There was no easy answer here, no simple path to freedom. "So, what do we do?" the figure asked, their voice barely above a whisper. The woman's eyes met theirs, her expression haunted. "We find another way. We find a way to free the souls without destroying the ship. But it won't be easy. There are things on this ship far darker than anything you've faced so far. And some of them have been waiting for this moment." The ship groaned again, louder this time, as though in response to her words. The figure tensed, their hand instinctively gripping their sword as they scanned the horizon. The silence that followed felt suffocating, thick with the weight of impending doom. "You feel it too, don't you?" the woman asked, her voice tinged with a hint of fear. "The ship is stirring, aware of our presence." The figure nodded, their senses on high alert. The air was thick with something dark, something ancient and angry. It wasn't just the ship, they were being watched, hunted by something far older than the spirits they had fought before. Suddenly, the deck beneath their feet shifted, the wood groaning and creaking as if some massive force had awakened. The ship lurched forward, throwing them off balance. The woman grabbed the figure's arm, steadying them as the ship shuddered again, more violently this time. "It's starting," she said, her voice urgent. "We need to move. The ship is awakening fully now. It won't stop until it's taken us back into its depths." The figure's heart raced, but they knew there was no choice. The woman was right. The ship was alive, and it had already begun to pull them back into its embrace. Without another word, they began to run, moving toward the nearest set of stairs that led deeper into the bowels of the ship. The wind howled around them, tugging at their clothes and hair as they descended into the darkness below. The walls of the ship seemed to close in around them, the air growing heavier with each step. The silence of the ship was almost unbearable now, broken only by the occasional creak of the timbers and the distant sound of water sloshing against the hull. The further they went, the colder it became. The temperature dropped with every step, until their breath hung in the air like mist. As they reached the lower deck, the figure could feel it, the presence of something watching them. They weren't alone anymore. The air felt thick with it, as though the ship itself were alive, breathing, watching, waiting, and then they saw it. At the far end of the hallway stood a massive, ornate door, its surface covered in strange symbols, more intricate than any they had seen before. The door was slightly ajar, a faint light spilling from the crack. The figure could feel the pull of it, a magnetic force drawing them closer. It was the heart of the ship, its center. Its power, that's it, the woman said, her voice barely a whisper. The heart of the ship. But be careful. The moment you step inside, it will know you're here. The figure stepped forward, their swords still in hand, ready for whatever lay beyond the door. They had come this far. There was no turning back now. With a deep breath, the figure pushed the door open, stepping into the chamber beyond. Inside, the heart of the ship pulsed with an eerie, unnatural glow. It was a massive, crystalline structure, suspended in mid-air by an invisible force. The air around it crackled with dark energy, and the temperature dropped even further, until the figure could see their breath in the air. But it wasn't just the heart that caught their attention. Surrounding the heart, suspended in the air like phantom apparitions, were dozens of souls, trapped, their faces twisted in agony as they reached out toward the figure. The souls seemed to writhe in the air, their ethereal forms flickering in and out of existence, as though caught between two worlds. This was the true heart of the ship. And it was more terrifying than anything the figure had ever imagined. The woman stepped forward, her face pale, her eyes filled with sorrow. "This is where it all began," she said softly. "This is where the ship was born, out of darkness, out of lost souls." The figure could feel the weight of her words. They had come to the heart of the ship, but what would they do now? The air in the chamber was thick with the stench of decay and despair, as if the ship itself had been soaked in the pain of countless souls, their anguish lingering in every corner. The heart, a massive crystalline structure suspended in mid-air, pulsed with an eerie, sickly glow, casting long shadows on the walls of the chamber. Around it, the souls writhed in agony, their faces twisted in terror and sorrow as they reached out toward the figure. Their hands, ethereal and flickering, seemed to beg for release, but their cries were drowned out by the oppressive silence of the ship. The figure stood frozen for a moment, their heart racing as they took in the sight before them. This was the source of the ship's curse, the heart that had bound it to the sea, the anchor that had kept it alive through centuries of suffering. But it was more than just a heart, it was a prison that held not only the ship but the souls of all who had ever sailed on it. The woman stepped forward, her ethereal form flickering with a soft, pale light. Her eyes were fixed on the heart, her expression filled with a mixture of fear and sorrow. "This is where it began," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the faint hum of the crystal. "This is where the curse was born. And this is where it will end." The figure turned to her, their brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean? How do we end it?" The woman sighed, her gaze never leaving the heart. "You've already done part of it. You shattered the crystal that held the ship's power, that bound it to the sea. But the heart is still here, still alive. Destroying it will free the souls, but it will also sever the ship from the sea. The ship will die, and so will everything tied to it. The sea, the world, it will all collapse into darkness. The figure clenched their fists, their mind racing. They had known that there would be consequences, but they hadn't expected this. If they destroyed the heart, they would be condemning not just the ship but the very world itself. The weight of their decision pressed heavily on their shoulders. Then what do we do? The figure asked, their voice tight with frustration. We can't just leave them here, trapped forever. The woman's expression softened, and she stepped closer, her hand reaching out as if to offer comfort. No, we can't leave them. But there's another way to break the curse without destroying everything. We need to find the soul that's keeping the heart alive. The one who bound it to the sea in the first place. The figure's eyes narrowed. The one who bound it. Who is that? The woman's gaze darkened. The ship's creator. The one who made the pact with the sea. The one who sold their soul to bind the ship to the ocean. To give it life and power. The figure's heart skipped a beat. But they're dead, aren't they? The woman nodded, her expression grim. Yes. But their soul is still here, trapped within the heart. It is the source of the ship's power, the reason the curse persists. If we can find their soul and release it, we can break the curse without destroying the ship. The souls will be freed, and the ship will finally be at peace. The figure took a deep breath, their mind racing. It sounded simple enough, but they knew that nothing on this ship was ever simple. The ship was alive, its very essence twisted and corrupted by centuries of darkness. Finding the Creator's soul would not be easy. How do we find it? The figure asked, their voice steady despite the fear gnawing at the edges of their thoughts. The woman looked up at the heart, her eyes filled with determination. The soul is tied to the ship itself. It will not be easy to reach, but it is not beyond our grasp. We must follow the trail of the ship's power. We must go deeper into the ship, into the places where its energy is strongest. The figure nodded, their resolve hardening. There was no choice. They had come this far, and they would see it through to the end. The woman began to move, her ghostly form gliding toward the far side of the chamber. The figure followed, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. The chamber was vast, its walls lined with strange, twisted symbols, and the air seemed to grow colder with every step they took. The faint glow from the heart illuminated their path, casting long, distorted shadows on the walls. As they reached the far end of the chamber, the woman stopped, her eyes scanning the walls. There, she said, her voice barely a whisper. The figure turned, following her gaze. There, on the wall, was a door, small and unassuming, hidden behind a tangle of vines and webs that seemed to pulse with a faint, otherworldly energy. The door was carved with intricate symbols, similar to those that adorned the walls of the chamber, but these were different, newer, fresher. The figure could feel the power radiating from it, a dark and twisted energy that seemed to seep into the very air around them. This is it, the woman said, her voice filled with a strange mixture of fear and hope. Beyond this door lies the soul we seek. The figure nodded, their grip tightening on their sword. They had no idea what lay beyond that door, but they knew one thing for certain. they would not back down now. The curse would end, one way or another. With a steady hand, the figure reached for the door, their fingers brushing the cool, damp wood. The moment they touched it, a jolt of energy shot through them, as if the ship itself were testing them, probing their resolve. The figure gritted their teeth, pushing through the pain as they twisted the handle. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase that led down into the bowels of the ship, into the heart of its power. The woman stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is the final step. The soul we seek is down there. And with it, the key to breaking the curse." The figure nodded once more, their heart heavy with the weight of the task ahead. They had come this far. Now, they would face whatever lay in the depths of the ship to end the curse once and for all. The air grew heavier as they descended the narrow staircase, the steps creaking beneath their feet, the darkness thickening around them. With each step, the figure felt the weight of the ship's presence pressing down on them, as if the very walls were alive, watching, waiting. The pulse of the ship's heart resonated through the walls, a steady thrum that seemed to echo in the depths of their chest. The further they went, the colder the air became, until it felt as though the very essence of the ship was freezing their bones. The woman led the way, her ghostly form flickering faintly in the darkness, the faintest glow illuminating the path ahead. Her expression was grim, her steps silent, as though she had walked this path countless times before. The figure followed closely behind, their senses alert, every instinct on edge. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The walls seemed to close in around them, the oppressive silence broken only by the occasional drip of water echoing from the unseen depths below. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of descending, they reached the bottom of the staircase. Before them stood a massive, ornate door, its surface covered in strange symbols that glowed faintly in the dim light. The air around the door felt charged with a strange energy, thick and heavy, as though it were the threshold to something ancient, something powerful. "This is it," the woman said, her voice barely a whisper. "Beyond this door lies the soul we seek. The one who bound the ship to the sea. The one who made the pact with the ocean, selling their soul in exchange for the ship's power." The figure stood still, their heart racing. This was the moment. They had come so far, faced so many dangers, and now they stood before the final challenge. They reached out and placed their hand on the cold, iron door, feeling a shiver run down their spine as the symbols beneath their fingers seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. The ship was aware of them. It knew they were here. With a deep breath, the figure pushed the door open. The chamber beyond was vast, its walls lined with strange, intricate carvings, their meaning lost to time. The air was thick with the scent of salt and decay, and the faint glow of the ship's heart seemed to permeate every corner, casting long shadows that twisted and writhed like living things. In the center of the room stood a massive altar, its surface covered in ancient runes, the stones slick with moisture. Upon the altar lay a figure, cloaked in shadows, their form indistinct but unmistakably human. The woman stepped forward, her face pale, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and sorrow. "This is the soul we seek," she said softly, her voice tinged with sorrow. "This is the Creator, the one who bound the ship to the sea." The figure stepped closer, their heart heavy in their chest. The Creator's soul lay before them, wrapped in a strange, ghostly energy that seemed to radiate from their body. It was as though the very air around them was alive with power, the ship's magic pulsing through every inch of the room. The figure could feel it in their bones, could feel the pull of the ship's power, urging them forward. The woman reached out and placed her hand on the altar, her fingers tracing the runes. "We have to free them," she said, her voice trembling. "We have to release their soul from this prison, or the curse will never end." The figure nodded, their grip tightening on their sword. The time had come to make a choice. They could destroy the heart, end the ship's reign of terror, but that would mean the death of the ship, and the death of everything tied to it. Or, they could free the Creator's soul, breaking the curse without destroying the ship, but that path was fraught with danger. The Creator's soul was bound to the ship in ways that no one fully understood. Freeing it could have consequences they could not predict. "Do you think it will work?" the figure asked, their voice low, almost fearful. The woman's eyes flickered with doubt, but she nodded. "It has to. This is the only way." The figure stood there for a long moment, their mind racing. They had come so far. The decision before them was unimaginable. The ship, the ocean, the very fabric of reality was at stake, and only one choice could be made. With a steady hand, the figure reached out and placed their hand on the altar. The moment their fingers made contact, a wave of energy surged through them, a force so powerful that it almost knocked them off their feet. The symbols on the altar glowed brighter, and the air around them seemed to warp, twisting into a vortex of light and darkness. The Creator's soul stirred, a voice, low and raspy, echoed through the chamber. "You should not have come. This ship is my prison, and it will be your tomb." The figure froze. The voice was not the Creator's, but something darker, something ancient. The ship had awakened to their presence, and it was not pleased. The woman's eyes widened in alarm. "It's too late. The ship is alive. It knows what we're trying to do." The ground beneath their feet trembled, and the ship groaned, its very bones creaking in protest. The walls of the chamber seemed to ripple, as though the ship itself was warping reality to keep them trapped within its grasp. The figure felt a surge of cold, an icy chill that gripped their heart, freezing them in place. "You cannot escape," the voice whispered, its tone cold and filled with malice. "This ship is bound to the sea, and so are you." The figure's breath came in short, shallow gasps as they tried to pull away from the altar, but the energy that surrounded them held them in place, forcing them to face the soul that lay before them. The darkness in the chamber grew deeper, the shadows more oppressive, until it felt as though the very ship were closing in around them, threatening to swallow them whole. But then, amidst the darkness, they saw it, a flicker of light, faint but unmistakable. The Creator's soul, struggling against the pull of the ship's power. It was weak, fractured, but still alive. The figure took a deep breath, steeling themselves for what was to come. "We have to free them," the woman said, her voice filled with desperation. "We have no other choice." With a surge of strength, the figure pulled their sword free, the blade gleaming with a strange, otherworldly light. They raised it high, the power of the ship pressing down on them with unbearable force. They had one chance. One strike. With a cry, the figure brought the sword down upon the altar. The moment the sword struck the altar, the entire chamber seemed to shudder. The energy that had once flowed so freely around them erupted in a violent burst of light, blinding and overwhelming. For a split second, the figure could feel the very fabric of reality unraveling. The walls seemed to ripple, as though the ship itself was recoiling in pain. The air grew thick with a tension that made it hard to breathe, as though the very atmosphere was pressing in on them from all sides. The woman cried out, her form flickering in and out of existence, her eyes wide with shock and fear. "No. You can't." But it was too late. The blade had made contact, and the ship's power surged through it, transferring an unbearable weight of darkness directly into the figure. The force was immense, pushing them to their knees as they gasped for air. The heart of the ship seemed to pulse in time with the growing chaos, and the voice, that dark, ancient voice, echoed in their mind, "You cannot break what has been bound. You are nothing but a speck in the vastness of the sea." The figure gritted their teeth, fighting against the suffocating force that threatened to consume them. Their fingers tightened around the hilt of the sword, grounding themselves in the only thing they had left, willpower. They could feel the Creator's soul now, pulsing weakly within the altar, struggling against the weight of the ship's power. The room trembled with the force of its struggle. "No," the figure whispered, their voice barely audible against the storm of energy that churned around them. "We will free you." The woman's figure wavered beside them, her voice desperate. "We can't. The ship's wrath has already begun. We must stop before it consumes us all." But the figure's resolve was unwavering. They had come too far, fought too hard. They would not fail now. With a growl of determination, the figure raised the sword once more, its light now burning with a fierce, ethereal glow. They focused every ounce of their strength into one final strike, aiming not at the altar, but at the heart of the ship itself, at the source of its malevolent power. The sword thrummed in their hand, responding to their intent, and with a cry of defiance, they plunged it into the very heart of the chamber. The world seemed to tear apart. The moment the blade entered the heart of the ship, a thunderous roar filled the air, deafening and all-consuming. The room erupted into a blinding flash of light, the energy surging outward in a violent explosion that sent the figure crashing to the cold stone floor. The very ship groaned, as though in agony, its structure quaking with the force of the blow. The ship's power, once so suffocating, now began to unraveling like a thread pulled loose from a garment. The figure's body ached, their vision swimming as they struggled to stay conscious. The light from the heart flickered, then dimmed, as though it was being drained of its power. The air, once thick with oppressive energy, began to clear. The oppressive pressure that had weighed so heavily on them seemed to lift, replaced by a strange, unfamiliar stillness. The figure could feel the ship's heartbeat, once loud and menacing, slow and grow faint. We did it." The woman whispered, her voice filled with awe. The figure slowly rose to their feet, their body trembling with exhaustion. The room around them was eerily silent, the once oppressive presence of the ship now gone, replaced by a strange calm. The heart of the ship, its glowing crystal now cracked and dim, lay in the center of the room, its power waning. The figure stepped closer, their breath shallow, as they looked down at the broken heart. The ship's dark voice, now weak and strained, filled the room one last time. "You have freed me. But there is a price to pay. The figure glanced at the woman, their eyes filled with determination. We knew there would be a price. We were willing to face it. The woman's expression darkened. The ship's power is dying, but so too is the ocean's. The balance is shattered. The world will change. The figure nodded slowly, the weight of the words sinking in. They had broken the curse, freed the souls, and shattered the ship's power, but at what cost? The ship was not just a curse, it had been a part of the ocean's heart. A living entity that had kept the tides in balance. With its death, the very fabric of the sea would unravel. We will find a way to restore the balance, the figure said, their voice steady. But we cannot undo what has been done. The ship is gone, and so too are its dark forces. The souls that were bound to it are free, and the curse is broken. For now, that is enough. The woman sighed, her form flickering again. You are right. The souls are free. But what will become of them? What will become of us? The figure's gaze turned to the door at the far end of the chamber. The ship was dying, but the souls had been released. The time for their decision had come. We will face whatever comes next. The figure said. But first, we need to leave this place. We can't undo what's been done, but we can walk forward from here. Together, they turned and walked toward the door. Behind them, the sound of the ship's final death throes echoed through the chamber, and the distant crashing of waves could be heard from somewhere far below. The air was clear now, the oppressive weight of the ship's power gone, replaced by a soft, quiet peace. As they stepped out into the cool air of the night, the figure took one last look at the wreckage of the Silver Sea, knowing that their journey had not ended, but had only just begun. The sea was free, but the cost of that freedom had yet to be fully understood. They had broken the curse. But the world they returned to was a different one than the one they had left behind. The moonlight bathed the world in a silvery glow as the figure and the woman emerged from the crumbling ship, stepping out onto the sands of the shore. The once menacing waves now lapped gently against the rocks, their rhythmic motion almost soothing in its tranquility. The weight that had hung in the air for so long was gone, replaced by a profound silence, but that silence was not comforting. It was the quiet after a storm, the stillness that follows chaos. Though the ship was dead, its death had altered the world in ways that no one could have anticipated. The sea no longer seemed to pulse with the same energy it once had. There was an unnatural calm to the ocean now, a stillness that felt wrong, as if the ocean itself was holding its breath, unsure of what would come next. The woman paused beside the figure, her expression somber. Her ghostly form flickered in the moonlight, as though she were no longer fully tethered to the world of the living. "It's over," she said softly, her voice tinged with a mixture of relief and sorrow. "The ship is gone, and the curse is lifted. But what now? What happens to the souls that were bound to it? What happens to the sea?" The figure looked out over the vast expanse of the ocean, their mind heavy with the questions she had asked. They had freed the souls, shattered the ship's power. But the consequences of their actions were still unknown. The ship had been more than just a cursed vessel, it had been a part of the very fabric of the sea, its heart tied to the tides and currents, its power shaping the fate of the ocean itself. "I don't know," the figure admitted, their voice low. But we have to find out. The world has changed, and we need to understand how. The balance is broken, and we can't just walk away from it. The woman nodded slowly, her translucent form shimmering in the moonlight. Perhaps we can restore the balance, she said, her voice filled with a faint hope. The souls are free now, and the ship is gone. But there is still so much we don't understand. So much that needs to be done. The figure turned to face her, their eyes filled with determination. We've come this far. We can't stop now. We'll find a way to fix what's been broken. Together. For a moment, there was silence between them, the weight of their shared journey hanging in the air. The woman seemed to consider his words, her form flickering again as if caught between two worlds. She sighed softly, and her gaze turned toward the distant horizon. You're right, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But we can't do it alone. We need allies. There are others out there who understand the sea better than we do. We'll need their help if we're to restore what's been lost. The figure nodded, understanding the truth in her words. They could not do this alone. The sea was vast, its mysteries countless. But with the woman's guidance, and the knowledge they had gained from their time aboard the Silver Sea, they might be able to uncover the truth and find a way to mend the fragile balance that had been shattered. As the night wore on, the figure and the woman walked along the shore, their footsteps soft against the sand. The sounds of the ocean seemed to echo in the distance, but it was no longer the deafening roar it once was. It was quieter now, as though the sea itself was recovering from the turmoil it had endured. The journey ahead would not be easy. The world they had returned to was a changed place, and the consequences of their actions had not yet fully revealed themselves. But they were not alone in this. There were others out there, hidden in the shadows of the world, waiting to be found. Allies who could help them understand the sea's true power, and perhaps, just perhaps, restore the balance that had been lost. The woman glanced at the figure, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. Where do we go from here? She asked softly. The figure smiled, a faint but determined smile. We go forward. We find those who can help us. And we fix what's been broken. Together, they walked on, their silhouettes merging with the shadows of the night as the ocean whispered its secrets to the stars above. The Silver Sea was no more, but its legacy lived on. And with it, the figure and the woman would face whatever came next, united, determined, and ready for the challenges ahead. The wind had shifted. It was no longer the damp, oppressive breeze that had once carried the scent of decay from the Silver Sea's wreckage. Instead, it was a cool, cleansing wind, a whisper from far across the ocean, beckoning them forward. It was the first sign of hope they had felt in what seemed like an eternity. The figure could feel it in their bones, a shift in the very air around them. The ocean, though still quiet, no longer seemed to hum with malevolent energy. But its silence, its stillness, was not a sign of peace. It was a warning. We can feel it, can't we? The woman asked, her voice soft as they continued their walk along the shoreline. Her form, though ever ethereal, was more solid now, no longer flickering between worlds. The freedom from the ship's curse had begun to have a profound effect on her, and yet, the shadow of the past lingered within her eyes. We can, the figure replied, their gaze fixed on the endless stretch of water ahead. The silence of the sea unsettled them more than the chaos that had preceded it. There was something unnatural about it. But I don't know if it's a warning or if it's the calm before the storm. The woman's eyes narrowed as she watched the horizon. I wish I could feel what you do. I feel lost, in a way. The ship's destruction should have brought relief, but all I feel is emptiness. You've been tied to it for so long. The sea, the ship, the curse, it was your world. Now, that world is gone. It's going to take time to adjust. They paused as the sound of distant waves reached their ears, the tide gently rolling in and out with a rhythm that felt too regular, too deliberate. The figure could see the way the woman's form shuddered as if she were trying to find herself again, as though the weight of the past were pulling her backward, holding her to something that no longer existed. I was once part of something larger, the woman said. Her voice tinged with nostalgia. Something that existed beyond me. And now, I am just me. I don't know who I am anymore. You are still you, the figure reassured her, their tone steady. You are not the ship, nor its curse. You are more than that. The woman nodded slowly but said nothing more. She seemed lost in her own thoughts, drifting between the past and the present, torn between two worlds. The figure understood her struggle all too well. They too were haunted by the past, by the things they had seen, the choices they had made. But they had learned to move forward, to walk away from the shadows and into the light. I know of others, the woman said suddenly, her voice pulling the figure from their thoughts. Others who can help us. They are seers, guardians of the old ways. They might know what has happened to the sea, what we can do to restore balance. If we find them, we might be able to understand what comes next. The figure turned toward her, curiosity sparking in their eyes. Where are they? The woman hesitated, as if searching her memory. Across the western shore, deep into the forest. There are legends of a temple hidden among the trees. They say it is a place where the old magic still thrives. The magic that connects the sea to the land. The figure felt a sense of urgency at her words. The path was clear now, though it was shrouded in mystery. They had been on this journey to break the curse. To free the souls, to destroy the silver sea, but they hadn't realized until now that the real challenge was only just beginning. Then we go, the figure said, their voice resolute. We need to find this place. We need answers. The woman's form shimmered with a faint light, and she smiled, though it was a wistful smile. You truly are determined, aren't you? It will not be easy. The journey will be long, and the forest is treacherous. There are things there that guard the ancient secrets. But if we are to restore balance, it is the only way. The figure nodded, steeling themselves for whatever lay ahead. They had come so far, and they couldn't afford to turn back now, with no more words between them. They set off, their footsteps falling in sync as they walked through the night, heading toward the unknown. The path ahead was veiled in shadows, but the moonlight glinted on the distant horizon, casting a path of silver across the land. The wind picked up as they moved forward, and the figure could feel the presence of the ocean behind them. The water seemed to hum softly, as if the sea itself was calling to them. They knew the journey would be dangerous, there were forces in the world beyond the sea, ancient and powerful, that had not been disturbed in centuries. The ship's death had not been the end of their story, but the beginning of a new chapter. As they walked, the woman spoke again. Her voice tinged with a quiet sadness. I wonder how long it will take before the sea changes. Before we can feel its power again, in a way that is not tainted by the curse. Will we ever know a world where the ocean is not haunted by the ghost of the silver sea? The figure glanced at her, their expression thoughtful. Maybe. But we can't change the past. We can only look to the future, and do our best to make it one worth living in. For a moment, there was silence between them as the sounds of the ocean and the wind filled the air. Then, the woman spoke again, her tone light, almost playful. You know, I think you're right. Perhaps we can't change the past. But we can make the future our own. The figure smiled, the first genuine smile in what felt like an eternity. Let's make it a future worth living. The forest loomed ahead of them, dark and dense, its towering trees stretching into the night sky like ancient guardians of some forgotten world. The air had grown cooler, the wind carrying the scent of pine and moss, but there was something unsettling about the stillness of the woods. Even the usual sounds of nocturnal creatures seemed muted, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. The woman, her translucent form shimmering faintly in the moonlight, walked beside the figure. Her presence had become a comfort, though the silence between them grew heavier with each passing step. The weight of their journey was taking its toll, the uncertainty of what lay ahead gnawing at the edges of their minds. They had come this far, but now, the true test had begun. Do you feel it? The woman asked, her voice barely above a whisper as she looked around, her eyes searching the shadows. Something is watching us. The forest is not as it seems. The figure paused, scanning the darkness beyond the trees. There was an oppressive stillness, the kind that pressed against the chest, a subtle weight that made the air feel thick. I feel it too, they replied, their hand resting lightly on the hilt of their sword. The forest is old. Its secrets are buried deep within these woods. But we can't turn back now, the woman nodded, though her expression was uncertain. I know. But be careful. There are tales of guardians, creatures that protect the ancient paths. We may be walking into their domain, we don't have a choice, the figure said, their voice firm. The answers we seek lie deeper in this forest. We have to push forward. With that, they continued their journey into the depths of the forest, the moonlight filtering through the canopy above in slivers, casting eerie shadows on the ground. The trees stood like silent sentinels, their gnarled roots twisted into the earth, as if holding on to something long buried. As they ventured further, the air grew colder, the trees seeming to close in around them. The path ahead became less clear, the trail obscured by thick underbrush and fallen leaves. Every now and then, the figure would catch a glimpse of movement in the corners of their vision, a flicker of shadow, a rustle of leaves, but when they turned to look, there was nothing there. I don't like this, the woman muttered, her voice edged with concern. The forest is alive in a way I've never felt before. It's the old magic, the figure said, their voice calm but with a hint of unease. The magic that ties the sea to the land. It's stronger here, and it's watching us. But we can't afford to be distracted by fear. We need to find the temple. The woman didn't respond, but the figure could feel her hesitation, her uncertainty. They too were uneasy, but the urgency of their mission pushed those feelings aside. The temple awaited them, and with it, the knowledge they needed to restore the balance that had been broken. As they pressed on, the forest seemed to grow darker, the shadows stretching longer and longer. The silence was broken only by the occasional crack of a twig underfoot or the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. But beneath it all, there was something else, something deeper. A faint hum, almost imperceptible, but steady. It was the sound of power, ancient and untamed, reverberating through the trees. The woman's eyes narrowed as she stopped, tilting her head to listen. "Do you hear that?" The figure paused, straining to hear. At first, it was nothing more than a whisper on the edge of hearing, but soon it grew clearer, a deep, rhythmic pulse, like the beating of a heart. It was coming from ahead, from deeper within the forest. "It's coming from the temple," the woman said, her voice laced with both awe and fear. "We're close." The figure's heart quickened, the anticipation rising within them. The temple was not just a place of power, it was a key, a link between the sea and the land, between the past and the future. They had to reach it, had to uncover the truth of what had happened to the ocean, to the world. But as they moved closer, the air seemed to thicken, the hum growing louder, more insistent. The trees themselves seemed to bend, their branches twisting in unnatural ways, as if trying to block their path. The figure drew their sword, ready for whatever awaited them in the heart of the forest. The woman's form flickered, as though the energy of the forest was beginning to pull at her, to drag her back into the darkness. "We have to hurry," the figure said, their voice tense. "Whatever's in the temple, it won't wait for us." They broke into a run, their feet pounding against the earth, the woman's ethereal form keeping pace beside them. The pulse of the forest seemed to grow louder with each step, a low, throbbing sound that resonated deep within their bones. And then, through the trees, they saw it, a faint glow, like a flickering candle in the distance. It was the temple, hidden deep within the forest, its stone walls half covered by vines and moss. But there was no mistaking it. This was the place. The figure slowed as they approached the entrance, their heart racing. The temple was ancient, its walls carved with symbols and runes that pulsed with an otherworldly light. The air around it was charged, thick with magic, with history. "This is it," the woman whispered, her voice filled with awe. "This is the heart of the forest's power." The figure stepped forward, their hand reaching out to touch the cold stone of the temple's entrance. The moment their fingers brushed the surface, a wave of energy washed over them, as though the very earth itself was alive, reacting to their presence. And then, the doors of the temple slowly creaked open, revealing the darkness within. The air within the temple was thick with ancient power, heavy with the weight of secrets long buried beneath the stone. The doors creaked open, their movement slow and deliberate, as if the temple itself were reluctant to reveal its inner sanctum. The figure stepped forward, their heart pounding in their chest. Every instinct screamed at them to be cautious, but they couldn't afford hesitation now. The answers they sought lay beyond the threshold. Behind them, the woman lingered for a moment, her form flickering with a soft, otherworldly glow. She too could feel the pull of the temple, the force that emanated from its walls, a force that seemed to call to something deep inside her. She took a steadying breath and followed the figure inside, The temple was vast, its interior dimly lit by the faint glow of luminescent moss clinging to the walls. The air smelled of ancient earth and the faintest trace of salt water, a reminder of the silver sea that had shaped their journey. The floor was covered in a thick layer of dust, undisturbed by time, but the stillness of the place was not one of peace, it was a silence that hinted at something dark. "Something waiting, do you feel it?" the woman asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She stood just behind the figure, her eyes wide with a mix of wonder and dread. "It's as if the very walls are watching us," the figure nodded slowly, their senses heightened as they took in every detail of the temple's interior. Strange symbols were carved into the stone, twisting patterns that seemed to shift and change the longer one stared at them. At the far end of the chamber stood an altar, its surface covered in the same runes, glowing faintly in the dim light. Above it, an enormous mural stretched across the ceiling, depicting the ocean in all its fury, whirlpools, crashing waves, and the shipwrecks of lost sailors. The sea seemed alive, a vast, untamable force, as if it were a living entity. "This is it," the figure said quietly. "This is where the magic began. Where the connection between the sea and the land was forged." They approached the altar, their steps echoing in the hollow silence of the temple. The woman followed, but kept a few paces behind, her eyes scanning the room warily. The sense of something watching them was growing stronger, and every instinct she had told her to turn back. But she could not. They had come too far. As they reached the altar, the figure's hand hovered over the surface. The runes glowed brighter under their touch, sending a ripple of energy through the room. The ground beneath their feet trembled, as if awakening after centuries of slumber. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the chamber, a low, ancient sound, like the rumble of thunder in the distance. It was not a voice of a person, but of the sea itself, its voice woven into the very fabric of the temple. "Who dares to disturb the slumber of the silver sea?" the voice boomed, its tone both commanding and mournful. "What fools have come to unravel the secrets that should remain buried?" The woman stepped back instinctively, her heart racing. "It's speaking to us. The temple, it's alive." The figure stood firm, their gaze fixed on the altar. "We seek the truth. We seek to understand the curse. To undo the damage that has been done to the sea, to the land." The voice fell silent for a moment, the tension in the air thick enough to suffocate. Then, the voice spoke again, softer this time, though no less powerful. "The curse cannot be undone by mere mortals," it intoned. "The sea and the land are bound by forces older than time itself. You are but a fleeting breath in the grand cycle. What you seek cannot be granted without cost." The figure's grip on their sword tightened. "We know the cost. But we will not turn away. We will face whatever challenges lie ahead." The temple rumbled, as if the very walls were reacting to their words. The air grew colder, and the light from the runes began to pulse erratically, casting strange, shifting shadows across the room. The woman shivered, her gaze fixed on the altar. "Very well," the voice said, its tone resigned. "You have chosen your path. But know this, those who seek the power of the sea must also bear its burden. The ocean's fury is not easily quelled. It is a force that does not forgive." Suddenly, the altar began to shift. The stone cracked and groaned as it split apart, revealing a hidden compartment beneath it. From within, a small, glowing crystal rose, suspended in mid-air by some unseen force. It pulsed with a soft, ethereal light, casting strange reflections on the walls. The figure stepped forward, their hand reaching toward the crystal. "What is this?" they asked, their voice filled with awe. "This," the voice replied, "is the heart of the Silver Sea. The source of its power. The key to understanding what has happened to the ocean. But be warned, the power within is not for the faint of heart." The woman reached out, her fingers grazing the surface of the altar. "What must we do with it? How do we restore balance?" "You must take the crystal," the voice said, "but you must also face the ocean's judgment. To restore the balance, you must confront the ghost of the sea. Only then will the curse be broken." The figure's eyes narrowed as they looked at the crystal, their mind racing. "The ghost of the sea?" they echoed, unsure of what the voice meant. But before the voice could answer, the ground beneath them shook violently, and the temple seemed to come alive. The walls cracked, and the ceiling groaned as if the temple itself were coming undone. The crystal began to glow brighter, its light blinding. "You must decide now," the voice urged, its tone growing frantic. "The choice is yours. Take the crystal and risk your soul, or leave and let the curse remain." The figure reached out, their hand closing around the crystal, and in that instant, the world seemed to shatter. The temple crumbled, and the light from the crystal flared, swallowing them whole.